Hi there, thanks for tuning in. I'm Samantha Deacon, one of the founding partners of Campus Capital, and I'm here with two of our student VCs, Alex Thiery and Tanja Kuzman. Today the topic is centered around the feedback VCs give founders when they're pitching for investment, why we at Campus Capital put such an emphasis on giving quality feedback, especially in a no scenario, and how that feedback becomes a value add for both sides of the table. First though, Tanja, Alex, would you like to properly introduce yourselves? Okay, great. Thank you, guys. And how about we start then with the topic of the day. So why is feedback important to you? Mm. Right, okay, thank you, Tanja. Somebody's saying that we can't hear you for some reason, which is a tad unfortunate. Is anybody else on the live stream unable to hear Tanja? Okay, nobody's coming back, so we'll just continue as planned. Alex, why do you... Right, okay, let me change this. All right, guys, we're going to close this down and come back and sort out the audio. So we'll be back very shortly. Same link. Okay, back in a minute. Okay, everybody, we're back. Sorry about that. We seem to have cured our audio problem, but a couple of messages coming through that we couldn't hear the intros either. We couldn't hear anything from Tanja or Alex, so hopefully we've sorted that out now. If it's still a problem, let us know again in the comments and we'll try again to sort it out. But I think we're there, so sorry you guys for having to repeat yourselves, but please introduce yourselves to our live streamers.
So hi everyone from my side, hopefully you hear me now, and thank you for sticking with us here. So I'm a Campus Capital student VC, and I'm with Campus Capital from its beginning. I'm also a PhD student in finance at University of Sheffield, and just someone who loves technology and startups, really.
Hi, so I'm Alex Thiery, and I'm a PhD student as well at the University of Sheffield, and I'm a developmental biologist, so it's very different to Campus Capital, but I've been with Campus Capital for around a year now since we first started last year, so I joined at the same time as Tanja.
Thanks, guys. And so, Tanja, you were just telling us before, I hope you can remember some of what you were just saying, but you were just telling us before why feedback is important to you. Would you be able to recap that story you just told us again, please?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I think that when we say no to founders, they feel really disappointed with the answer, of course, because they were expecting yes. And then for them, it's really crucial to get some kind of feedback as a starting point of what they need to change. And what I found out in the conversation with the founders in different events and after they got rejection, for example, from us, is that they really changed certain things to which we pinpointed during our conversations and during our meetings. So for the founders to get the feedback and the sense of what they need to change and how to improve their business is really, really crucial. And that is the reason why feedback is also really important for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I would agree with Tanja, of course, that in terms of the founders, it's that they've spent time preparing their pitch for us. So also it's important to give them feedback so they can make the changes that we ask of them. But at the same time, it's also just a form of respect. But on top of that, I feel that for ourselves, it's actually also important to give feedback, because during the feedback process, we go back to the team, we discuss the ideas, we discuss like what are the strengths and weaknesses of the business. And it really allows us to reflect on why we've made a decision in the first place. So because we then have to articulate it to the founders as well. So it really allows us to think about that process. And on top of that, the whole process allows a form of transparency to the decisions we make, because we have to actually put it down into writing and explain why. So we do have a clear-cut reason as to why we decided to make these decisions in the first place.
Yeah, and I would just tackle a little bit more of what Alex just said. It's like whenever we get a pitch, we have such a diverse team, like with different backgrounds and different expertise. So if we get a pitch with a product that has that encompasses basically, for example, artificial intelligence, then we have someone who is really, really an expert in that area, and he looks at the product, at the market, etc. And then we have also people who can look at the business from a different perspective, like finance perspective, marketing perspective, etc. So when we gather around over the table, we basically have all these points from different perspectives, and we discuss everything together as to make a decision that Alex just mentioned. So for us, it's also the learning process, because all of us learn something new during the process, and we learn from different kind of perspectives to look at businesses, which is also important for us and just gives us more weight to the decision that we are making, basically.
And I think it's a really interesting point as well about that you made, Alex, about it's kind of it's a sign of respect as well, right? That these founders are working incredibly hard on building their startup. Is the only startup they have, whereas an investor, a VC, will see hundreds of pitch decks and they have hundreds of startups, I guess, to choose from. And so it's in recognition of the fact that this is, their baby, right? And
of course. I mean, it's really important to realize that VC is a two-way street, whereby it takes work from both the founder's perspective, of course, in terms of developing the product and making the structural changes that a VC might require, but also demands work from the VCs. And I think that sometimes that might be slightly forgotten by certain VC firms. And I think that actually it's really important to make sure that you're putting in that work to give the feedback that the founders need, because that's holding up your side of the bargain.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear different things from different founders about experience they've had with VCs. Some have been incredibly positive and say that they have got great feedback, and others say that they really didn't get a sense of why a decision was made, or they felt that they were getting more of a maybe instead of a clear sort of no and a no because, especially. Why do you think student VCs, or you guys as student VCs, are more able to give feedback or do give feedback?
I think one of the things is that, we're all relatively new to the process. So it's very exciting to take part in it. And I think that we're quite hungry to get new pitch decks in. And we definitely don't want to say no to people, but we accept that sometimes investment isn't right for certain businesses. And in those cases, when we have to say no, we want to make sure that whilst we make it clear the decision that we make, we want to make sure that the founder actually understands that there is a reason behind it and that they can take something away from that. So, of course, for a business, they never want to get that answer. But I think if you give them the actual true reason why, and they can make those changes, which then might help them make changes which could help them secure funding in the future, then I think that in some ways it can be almost as good as a yes, because if you get funding at the wrong time, then the business might not actually progress in the right direction anyway. So being able to make those changes early on and readjust the direction your business takes can be just as useful.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because it's also not necessarily that you're saying this isn't a good business. You're just saying that for us as an investment, this isn't right for these reasons, right?
And also not right at this specific period in time. Sometimes those conditions can change. So of course, we'll say to a founder, yes, this isn't the right time for you at this moment, and these are the reasons why. But in certain cases, we also do think that if you do make these changes and you feel that you're in a different position, then feel free to re-pitch the idea towards us, and then we can relook at it with a fresh pair of eyes. Of course, if the business hasn't changed dramatically, then you still might not be eligible. But depending, you do still have. It's definitely an interactive process where decisions can change over time depending on how things progress.
Yeah, and I also believe that, like, for in our case, for us, it's really, really different than for some other VCs, because we get a lot of pitch decks, and then for some VCs, it's really their capacity and the fact that they cannot spend that much time because of the deal flow and everything else and all other constraints that VCs are usually facing. So I think that for us, because we all have so many different backgrounds, and it's much easier for us to divide, like what we are looking at and how we are looking at the business, and then we are looking at it from different perspectives. And because of the fact that there is a larger team, I would say, with this kind of diversity, for us, it's much easier to sit around the table and have all these discussions and to rough thinking about whether to invest or not. And if not, why we are not investing, why are the reasons behind it, and just providing the founders with that kind of a feedback. So I think that our advantage is the fact that we have a larger team, basically, and that this is our strength at every single point in time, I would say.
So then how, when you're going about, when you've had these conversations in your team, you've made a decision to not take a deal forward, further forward in the pipeline, how do you both approach feedback? Is there a particular way you like to structure feedback? Are there certain things you like to include? What's the kind of best approach for you?
I will start. Okay. Alex is quiet. So I think that for the whole team is like, we usually structure the feedback as from the points that are the crucial, the most important ones, because sometimes you have a couple of points that are really, really crucial why we are saying no. And then there is a couple of things that they can improve with less effort, but they are still important in the process of their readjustments and maybe the timing, as Alex mentioned. So we usually, when we are structuring the feedback, we are trying to be transparent, which we are trying to be honest as well, because I think that in these cases, the honesty is the best policy, as they would say, because if you are honest towards the founder, then the development of the relationship is much, much stronger. So even if the founder comes back and says, okay, I have done some progress, I have, readjusted my business, and maybe now it's the timing, then this relationship was built on a solid ground. So it is not something that you said no and then there is a break of any kind of relationship, and that's it. So I think that for us, it's really crucial to respect the business of the founder, explain why we are not investing, being honest at the same time, and also providing a concrete feedback. So without any kind of loose sentences, like where it can be and it might not be, but just like going straight to the point, So I think that that's how we usually structure it as a team.
I'd also say that I approach feedback, but I'd say that the feedback starts from the minute that somebody sends you a pitch deck in. So it doesn't have to be like right at the end when you make that decision that you give them the feedback. Essentially, they send you a pitch deck and you look through it, and then if you make the decision not to go through with the first meeting, then you give them some feedback as to why. And then if you do go to a first meeting, then the feedback begins again the minute that you start having the conversation with them, because they're going to explain to you their idea, and then you're going to ask them questions about certain things. And that process, whilst you might not be saying to them, I don't like this or I do like this, like about certain aspects of the business. You are essentially questioning certain aspects of what they've done and why they've done them, and that is giving them, it clearly is directing them towards thinking about, you're basically asking them to think about certain aspects of their business,
right?
And that in a way is a form of feedback. And then afterwards that dialogue continues, and then if you do decide, we'll go back to the team and discuss what they've discussed with us, and then if we do want to proceed, we'll then we'll write an email and explain that we might want to elaborate on certain other aspects of the business we might not have discussed with them, which again is a form of feedback. And then if we decide that actually it's not right for us, we'll explain why the things that we discuss in the meeting actually don't suit the VC firm in that particular period of time.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with Alex. And when I speak with founders, sometimes they do not realize that part, that when we are asking questions, in some ways we are providing a feedback. So basically, when we are interested and when we are digging deeper in certain areas, this is because maybe we see that in that area there is some kind of maybe mismatch or something that needs to be worked on, etc. So when you are talking with a founder, and because it is so important, these meetings for them are like make it or break it at some point. So they really don't, like understand that with these questions during the meetings and all these discussions and exchanging emails in the meanwhile, all of that is really basically a feedback from us. And
I think often actually a founder that takes it on board during the meetings is actually a really good sign of a good founder. Yes. A lot of the time when they'll listen to the questions and they're really engaged in them, they realize that actually there are certain things for them to think about, and that's not something that a founder should be afraid of. I don't think a founder should be afraid of the fact that their business isn't perfect yet. It is obviously a development process, which is why they're seeking funding. If it was perfect, they wouldn't need any funding anyway. So I think that like the founders which are engaging in that process and realizing to take certain things on board, but are also willing to integrate those changes and accept that they're not necessarily perfect to begin with, I think that is a really good sign of a founder straight off.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's interesting that kind of the difference between the implicit feedback and the explicit feedback. In the the explicit feedback is the kind of like almost the rejection letter, right? Which is like these are all the reasons why we're not. But the implicit feedback, you're saying if we're asking you a lot about your competitors, it's possibly because you didn't include that information in your pitch deck, or so that in itself is feedback. That's really interesting. So then. It feels like we're kind of, talking quite generally about the feedback that we give. But do you have, obviously, like not naming anyone specifically, but do you have any specific examples over the last year where you've, you've given some feedback, maybe as part of a no because or otherwise, that particularly sticks out in your mind, and why? What happened there?
Alex, go on. I'm letting you lead.
So, well, for me, there's one case in particular where it was a really difficult decision, because the founder, well, first of all, we really liked the product, and the founder was extremely passionate and also clearly exceptionally creative, and those are characteristics which VCs are really looking for in someone they're wanting to invest in. Often it's actually about the person you're wanting to invest in, not just the product. And if somebody is clearly that creative, then you can be confident that over time they'll be able to develop new products and adapt their business plan to suit as the business grows and the business model changes. So we really did like the founder especially. However, the business had fundamental issues with the cost of production, and the founder was actually manufacturing all of the goods themselves. And for us, these were issues that really needed to be addressed before VC could come in and invest. But obviously, it's a little bit of a catch-22, because as for the business, the business needs money to actually be able to scale in the first place and make these structural changes. But at the same time, we're asking the founder to make these changes before we can actually give them the finance to, develop the business. But ultimately, the decision lied with the fact that VC isn't actually always the best option for a business, as I sort of mentioned before. So VCs are essentially there to make money, and obviously that's the hard truth. But at the same time, we don't want to be on a founder's back, making sure that they integrate the structural changes that we want them to get the money back as quickly as possible. And sometimes that's not what a business needs at that period of time. So, and done at the wrong time, it can basically cripple the business. So really we felt that they needed to make those changes first before we could provide any funding. But yeah, I don't know. It was just an interesting case, because then telling the founder about that obviously wasn't easy, because we really admired her passion for the product and etc. And we didn't really want to break it to them. But
and that was quite early really, on, wasn't it? When you'd not been a student VC very long when that one.
Yeah, we hadn't been there very long. But really, we just had to, you've just got to realize that actually it's best for the founder if we do give them honest feedback as to why, because then they can take this feedback away and actually make those changes and realize and integrate that into the business, and hopefully in the future they'll be able to change their products. But we did obviously make it clear that if they do make these changes, then please come back to us, because we really do like the product and the founder themselves. So, but yeah, it's sort of what I mentioned before about the fact that VC isn't a one-way relationship. Really, it's a marriage between the founder and the investor, and you're working together towards a common goal. But if you've got different interests, for example, the founder is wanting to further develop their product whilst the investors really wants to make a quick return, then VC might not be right for you.
How about you, Tanja?
Yeah, we had quite a few, let's say, difficult decisions to make, because in one of the cases we had an e-commerce startup, and their application was amazing. I mean, it was so simple, and it had so much passion into the product from the side of the founders, and the founder is really, really amazing in every possible sense. So you could see that person sees 10 steps ahead, and that really they consider everything around the business, everything around the market, etc. But there were a couple of things that really were, let's say, signs of worry for us. And even though we really liked the team and the product and everything that is related to it, one of the things that we saw as a problem is that they are overestimating the stage at which they are. So basically their level of development was much lower than what they were thinking it is. So they were requesting a larger raise, let me put it that way. So we observed a mismatch between the stage of development and on the other side, the funding they're trying to raise. And that was just like one of the things that we try to address in our feedback. So basically explaining to them that because these and these signs are there, and that you may not be considering these people as competition, and maybe these businesses as someone who can basically threaten your business at a certain point in time, or make your startup not really that good as you think it is. We see this mismatch between the stage where you are at and basically the level of funding you are trying to raise. And we see that quite often, I would say, because usually the founders are really afraid that they will run out of money. So they always increase this buffer. And when you go to break down the numbers, it's just you see really their fear that they won't be able to develop at a quick and fast pace as they would want to. So that's something that we see quite often. And also regarding the competition, it happened once that we went for a meeting with the founder, and we always do the homework and investigate the market and everyone else who is around there or have similar products throughout the world. So basically, it's not just the UK. You have to see what is going on everywhere else in the world. And we had this discussion where we were asking whether you know about this business, whether you know about that business. And the founder really did not know about it. So he was always claiming that it's not something that is threatening his business because it's on the other part of the world, etc. So in some cases, within your feedback, you have to explain them that as a VC investor, you're looking at businesses that might be global at a certain point in time. And that's the biggest desire of every single VC, right? So you have to pay attention of what others are doing. And in those cases, even though we really liked one part of the businesses, there were these small things, and we really had to give them an honest feedback saying, these are the things that we really think are problematic. So if you address them and if you reconsider and see that we are making a good point, maybe at a later stage, as Alex said, you can again approach us, because we really like these things as well. So it's not just giving them, you know, like the negative feedback saying, okay, these are all the wrongs that we don't like, and because of that we cannot invest. It's also pointing to them that, okay, you have really strong team, or you have a really strong product, etc. So we also point to these other sides that are really, really solid, I would say.
Yeah, that's
one of the points that Tanja made was actually was interesting about how about the amount of money that founders often ask for, and how this can be sometimes a little bit of a weakness, because it can actually work both ways. So you also don't want somebody to not value their business enough and not ask for enough money. So that is. But
it's such a difficult thing to do at this early stage as well, right? I mean, for anybody, let alone the founder, especially if they're a first-time founder, it's. But then, you know, that's part of what we're doing in educating, you know, generally, right?
Yeah. So sometimes I do feel like people have almost picked a number out of thin air without actually thinking about the fact that they are essentially valuing their business, and they find it might cost them a lot of money to develop the product, but they do actually need to put a fair valuation on their business.
Yeah, and I guess that's the interesting point about raising too much as well too early on, is that you raise too much too early on, you know, you're selling cheap, it's yeah. So, well, you may end up with less equity, etc., etc. Anyway, that's a totally different live stream.
Me going off on a sidetrack.
I mean, it's all part of the feedback thing, right? It's all part of the feedback process. So, but okay, so. Then it's starting to come out a little bit, but I think the topic today really is centered around value-added feedback. So rather than just kind of simple, general feedback, what does value-added feedback mean to you specifically?
I think it's actually giving the founder something that they can do to, rather than just saying to them, we don't like X and Y about the business, it's about telling them what changes they can actually go on to make, to then what changes would they have to make for you to consider investing in them. In certain circumstances, it might just be a business that you could never invest in which case sometimes that can be difficult. But then maybe the best thing to do is almost try to explain that to the founder, so that they can realize, actually, maybe I need to seriously rethink this plan.
Right.
But if it's a business that actually you couldn't. Yeah, exactly. So it's essentially
knocking
just
on every other VC's door and getting a no and wasting 6 months. Or,
Well, it wastes everybody's time essentially. So the point is basically just giving the founder the opportunity to go on and make changes, either by restructuring and changing completely the direction, or just making small changes which then could basically get them to where they need to be able to get the funding.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, if we put an example into motion, basically it's just like you can say to a founder, we think that you have a certain problem with the human capital within your startup, etc., and you can give them this kind of general, basically, feedback saying that, okay, something is wrong within your team, but on the other hand, you can go straight to the point and say, we believe that because you are an e-commerce application, that the marketing side of your business needs to be really strong, and we think that you are lacking a good, let's say, person or something like that. So that's how you are giving value-added feedback. It's not general, it's like straight to the point, and then that's the food for thought for the founder, so he can reconsider whether we are right or wrong, whether he can do something about it and change certain things. So I think that, as Alex said, this is just like the value-added feedback, and not just the general thing that you can say.
It's basically like it doesn't take that much more effort to actually add on that extra value on top of it. If you're going to give the founder feedback anyway, you've got to explain to them why you're not making that decision. It just, like you said, it's at first you say to them, well, these are the reasons why we can't invest, and then you just say to them, well, actually, these are the things that you should think about as a reason as to why you might get investment afterwards. So it's not actually difficult for. Well, I don't really think that it's difficult for VCs to do that, and it's definitely something that all VCs should.
And signposting as well, right? You guys, I know, Alex, I think the example you were talking about earlier, the story you were talking about, you signposted to other forms of funding that maybe were more relevant for the stage. Is that right? Was it like grant funding?
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it just depending. I think that's one of the main things with VC. Something that we see very often is that businesses will pitch to us at various different stages of their development, and actually, whilst there are VC can fill quite a wide bracket of investment criteria, it does massively depend on the stage of development that you're at. If you're somebody who's just starting your business up, then unfortunately VC is probably not right for you, because you do need to have some form of minimum viable product. And you might actually be looking more towards like angel funding or seed stage funding or whatever. And sometimes these things mean that the business itself is completely sound, but it's just that the stage you're at isn't where you should be pitching to us. And it can actually also be the opposite direction, that actually maybe, you know, you need a way larger amount of money than we can give to you. So it's funny how, yeah, the stage is something that you can point out to them relatively quickly, and it can massively help a founder.
All right. So then, if you had to sum it up, what is it essentially that you're trying to achieve, not just for the founders as a kind of pay it forward approach for the founders and the community, etc., but also for yourselves as VCs? What are you trying to achieve through giving founders the feedback that you do through spending that time?
Well, I would say that it's like we want to build relationships. That's one of the things that Alex already mentioned. So it's a two-way street, and it's a marriage. When we say it really is, because you don't want to be stuck for the next 10, 20 years or 5. It doesn't matter really with someone who you really don't like. So I think that it's building relationships, and that's one of the things. And the second thing is we really want to provide founders feedback, as we really know how hard starting up is. And that sometimes, because you have so many things on your list of things to do, basically you sometimes lose this objectivity or the perspective of an outsider. So if the founder starts knocking to VC's doors, he will go from one to another and getting no without any kind of feedback. That would waste his time. And on the other side, this business might have really great potential, but it needs just some kind of fine tuning. So for them, I think that we are trying to, in a way, help them to build their businesses, if that's possible, in another way, or maybe improve them. And for us, I think that we are all learning as a team, because like through these feedbacks, we also get to know some other sides of the businesses and some other perspectives. And maybe, like someone from the team sees things from the different perspective, and we get different kind of analysis, different kind of opinions. So it's just like the learning process for everyone within the team. And I think that again, that's like two-way relationship. We are providing feedback because we want to help founders, and because of the founders, we think that it's really important. But it's also on the other side important for ourselves, because of this learning curve and everything that we can do in our team, basically.
Yeah, what Tanja says about building relationships is, I definitely agree with that. So it's from a personal perspective, I don't want to. I want to give founders feedback, because I would feel horrible for them to spend time on pitching to us and come in to have a meeting with us, and then for them to leave and not have anything to take away from it whatsoever. So that's a quite strong motivation to give them feedback anyway. But also, like, we're representing Campus Capital, we want to make sure that people come and pitch to us, and for that reason, we want to make sure that people feel like it's a friendly atmosphere and they're actually getting something out of the process. And finally, so coming back to the relationships aspect, if somebody comes and pitches to you and you can actually maintain a relationship, you never know where they're going to be in 5 years' time. Maybe they start a new business with somebody else, or maybe they've spoken to somebody else who's just set up a really good business and say, hey, actually, these VCs are people who you should go speak to, because even if you're not ready for funding, they can explain to you why you might not be. So yeah, I think that building those relationships and spending the time doing that can help you get the best deal. So it's definitely a really useful aspect to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's a really long game, but it does happen. You do hear about, Mike and I have spoken about this with, VCs that we know that give really good feedback, even when they're saying no. And those founders do go away and they, they're entrepreneurs, so they do start another business with someone else, and they're straight back when they need to raise finance again. They remember that was, that girl was really, really good, and they were really helpful at that time, even when they were saying no. So I'm going to go pitch them
entrepreneurs
first.
are the people who speak. Entrepreneurs are the people who speak to people the most as well. And
they speak to each other. Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
If you want anybody to like you, essentially, you probably want entrepreneurs to be on your side.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. That's a very good point. All right, guys. So we don't have any questions from the live stream, but is there anything else you would like to add on the topic of value-added feedback? Anything else?
Right, I think I've covered. Yeah, I think from our discussion on this has pretty much covered everything I can.
That's fine. So then, how about we have a bunch of new student VCs starting right now, but also in January. What would be your one short piece of advice for student VCs, maybe giving their first piece of feedback to a founder?
Tanja?
Getting the time to think. Okay. So basically, I would say to them, respect every single pitch that you get through, because that's important. Like, every founder put their time, their lives, their money at a certain point in time into building this startup and building this idea. Be respectful at every point, as well as honest. And I would just say build the relationship. As Alex said, that's the crucial thing. And I think that all of us, personally, we really want to have good relationship with founders, whether we invest in them or not. And I think that that's the key thing that they need to take on every single meeting and during the whole process of discussions and giving them feedback, as far as I'm concerned. I
would say don't be afraid. So you've got to give feedback, and sometimes the business might not be right for investment, so you have to say no. And essentially, when somebody's coming to pitch to you an idea, they're asking for your opinion. They're asking, do you think that we're eligible for funding? So have confidence in the judgment that you make when you're actually interviewing them. Of course, you need to think through properly as to whether or not they are at the stage where they should get investment, and you need to talk that through with the team. But once you have made that decision, you clearly have reasons why you've made that decision. So don't be afraid to articulate that properly and make sure that you get that across to the founder.
Also, knowing that you're not always going to be right? There's plenty of cases where investors have passed on deals and then they've gone on to be these unicorns, and that's okay too. It's bound to happen.
I guess by that I just mean don't be afraid to say if you want to say no to someone, you don't want to be like, all right, well, actually, maybe you want to be decisive, and you want to as long as you explain why you've made those decisions, then they might not agree with you, but at least you've given them a reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so actually we do have a question from the live stream now. This is from Oliver. He's asking, how do you go about providing feedback for a pitch that you think is evidently flawed on an elementary level? Right. So, for example, where you think that the product is just never going to work. How do you do that? So he says, I assume you try to pull out any positives you can, but how do you go about dealing with the fundamental failings of the pitch? So I think what he's getting at is, how you're talking about giving feedback so they can go away and improve, but what happens when someone comes to you and you really just think this is just never, ever going to work?
You have to be polite, for one thing.
Yeah.
You do have to be polite. But yeah, it's definitely not always easy to give feedback. But there's even if it is on an elementary level, there's always a certain aspect of the business that is specifically weak. So say it's because they've clearly misunderstood the competition, for example. So they're never say for example, someone wants to break in and try to take over, well, any industry, but where there's already some major players, then you might just have to say to them, that we just don't think it's possible for this product to actually make it into this area because it's such a large, the tactic that you're taking, you're asking for small amounts of funding, and with this amount of money and you're wanting to put into advertising, you're never going to be able to break into a market where there's already tens of millions of pounds spent on advertising every year, for example. So you just need to break down what other competitors might be doing and how the money that you would be able to afford, basically how the money that you would be able to give to them won't solve their problems, because those problems are still going to be there. So that's what you need to point out.
So you're saying like honesty, just you have to be honest. It's the kind of
polite, but
right.
you still explain to them why.
Yeah.
You still explain to them why, but of course, honesty is always key. There's no point not being honest,
right?
In my opinion.
And we had a situation where we got a pitch through, right? And it was a product that is obviously can get, like you can become with that product a good entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, and you can create a company that has, 30 employees in like 1 year time and or 2 year time and something like that. And you can get, like something out of that kind of business. But it's obvious for us, it was obvious it is not startup. It doesn't have the potential to grow fast really quickly. And it's not something that can, become, worldwide or UK and Europe product that everyone would want to own. So in those cases, you really have to be frank and honest, saying that we believe that they're building a product which has market value, and explain to them that basically this is not a VC investment, that we cannot invest because we are looking for some other potential. But still their idea is not, it's valid, but it's valid for the certain percentage of the market. And that's not something that is VC investment at all. And on the other hand, you can always say when this happens that there are other ways of financing that they might be more proper for their businesses and what they need to look at. So I think that definitely there is a way to be, as Alex said, honest, but quite direct, because there is no point of making some hope or giving them a feedback that is loose, and then they think, okay, I can knock on the other VC's door, they just don't like me for some other reason, and things like that.
Yeah,
I think essentially you can break down their projections. So if they're projecting that they're going to be able to make X amount of money in the future, and you just fundamentally disagree that product is ever going to make it there, then you can just look at that projection that they have, and you can say, well, with X amount of money, there's Y, Z, and whatever reasons that you're not actually going to reach those projections in our eyes. So you can, say that. I think by looking at the growth that they're expecting, that is one way you can focus down on it and say that you disagree with the growth without having to say that you think that the business is necessarily rubbish.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting what you say is like, we disagree with the growth. It's like, in our opinion, this is not going to make it in the market because of these reasons. And I think there's an honesty, but there's also a humility with that of like, we could be wrong. This could be a case where we're wrong, but we don't get it. And if we don't get it, then we're probably not the right investors for you anyway.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
It's, it's that honesty, but also like not just assuming that, you know more than the founder does about their business, but, for us, it's not right.
And always sign off with that, even if although we think that it's not right for us, we really hope that we are wrong and that you actually prove us wrong, sort of thing. That's definitely something that's important.
Great. All right, so I think that was the last question. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us on the live stream. Thank you, Tanja and Alex, for sharing some of your experiences and insights from your last year as a student VC. To those of you watching, if you're a founder who's received great feedback from a VC before, or you're a founder who didn't receive any feedback from a VC before, please let us know in the comments. Do you completely disagree with everything that we've said today? Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear from you. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back with another VC related video soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.